everyone. Welcome to the workshop on polycentric and participatory governance in cultural tourism for community resilience, convened by ICOMOS ICTC, a working group on climate change and cultural tourism. I'm Ananya Bhattacharya, and I'm a member from ICOMOS India. I'm a member of the Bureau of ICTC, and I'm coordinating this group. Today, we are going to talk of, polycentric governance. Climate change is affecting our natural built and living heritage, and the challenges posed are very complex, uncertain, and multi-scale. In today's workshop, we'll discuss how polycentric governance or participatory governance of cultural heritage and tourism could strengthen resilience and adaptive capacities. When we talk of tourism and community resilience, there are several dimensions. It is about resilience to physical shocks and stress. It is about ability to cope with adversity, the ability to anticipate, prepare for, respond to, and recover from the onsets of climate change. In sustainable tourism, we talk of resilience addressing ecological sustainability. We talk of environmental, physical, and social risk management. We talk of disaster management. We also talk of innovations and adaptations of tourism businesses. Resilient-based governance is a coordination process of various actors that are independent of central power and are acting at different levels in response to observed or expected changes and their impacts. The governance and enjoyment of our heritage, the incredible shared or common resources we have inherited through generations, are shared rights and responsibilities. Responsible cultural tourism is about making places better for people to live in and better places for people to visit. So diverse stakeholders in tourism, ranging from operators, hoteliers, various service providers, government, local people, tourists, they all need to take action and be responsible to ensure cultural heritage and cultural tourism are sustainable. As you see in this diagram, polycentric governance relies on networks that connect stakeholders at multiple organizational levels. It also relies on collaborative, flexible, and learning-based approaches for adaptive destination co-management. Such a governance process may generate self-organization and cross-sector linkages among stakeholders. And today we'll discuss whether this may achieve better outcomes than the decentralized, centralized, or hierarchical governance systems in an uncertain environment. Polycentricity captures formal and informal institutional arrangements, mixed scales, local and national mechanisms, subsidies, and mandates, and refers to self-organization. It takes a commons-oriented approach to management of shared resources. It sets out a complex form of governance with multiple centers of semi-autonomous decision makers in cooperative and competitive relationships, resorting to conflict resolution mechanisms when necessary. The multiple governing authorities in polycentric governance are not necessarily related to each other. The stakeholders may include the state, the sub-state actors, the non-state actors. Mechanisms may be national and state laws, may be international oversight, may be public participation processes, and so on. The functioning is like a set of independent interacting actions, and the idea is that the institutional density creates greater resilience to shock and stress. So some of the questions we are going to discuss today are: how can effective polycentric mechanism in cultural tourism generate and achieve shared goals? How can heterogeneous institutional arrangements support information sharing and bring diversity and shared purpose and values? How can participatory governance improve the scope for self-organization? Some of the key words in developing polycentric governance are equity, inclusivity, accountability, adaptability, organizational multiplicity, contextual rulemaking, process-based systems, and so on. So today we'll be starting with the ICOMOS International Tourism Charter 2021, which is to be adopted very soon. And following this, we'll have 4 presentations. And in these 4 presentations, the speakers will be sharing established as well as emerging practices and methodologies set out through customs and living traditions or enabled through human-centric technology and innovative networks. At the end of the presentation, the presenters will ask you a question, and please raise your hand to unmute yourself, or you can write in the chat. So after these 4 rounds, we'll be having a Q&A session. For ease of management of time, I'll introduce all the speakers right in the beginning. So we'll hear from Dr. Celia Martinez, Professor of Art History Department and University of Granada. And as you all are aware, she has been coordinating the drafting of the Cultural Tourism Charter. So after Celia, we'll be listening to Cecily Smith-Christensen, founder of World Heritage Catalysis. We'll hear from her about VMAST, the UNESCO World Heritage Visitor Management Assessment and Strategy Tool. Then we'll be traveling across the world. So we'll be going to Kenya and we'll listen to Dr. Shane Mwangi, and he will be sharing about emerging methodologies in tourism that guarantee community resilience through the sensitivities and vulnerabilities of climate change. After that, we'll go to China and hear about indigenous people's perceptions on the culture-nature integrated values of honey rice terraces and how traditional management methods can be most effectively supported and maintained within the framework of World Heritage Program. And then we'll end with some Mediterranean diet. And so we'll have Sofia Fonseca from Portugal. She's the founder of Taituma Consultancy on Heritage and Culture. And she will be sharing insights on how polycentric approach may be used to implement the principles of Mediterranean diet to tackle food waste. All the resumes are there, so I'm not reading it out in the interest of time. And with this, I'd like to invite Celia to start her presentation. We have with us our EPs, Yung Kui and Johnny, who will be taking in your questions and who will be managing time. And we have Priyanka with us, who is managing the Zoom session. So please write down the questions in your chat, and over to Celia.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Good morning. Can you see my presentation now?
Not yet.
No, not yet. Okay, sorry. I'm going to try again. Is this ready now?
Yeah, but go into slideshow mode, please.
It's okay for you now?
Yes.
Okay, good. So thank you very much, Ananya, for organizing this and facilitating this session that you have worked a lot on it, as we all know. I'm very happy to see so many colleagues, or the screens of so many colleagues this morning. And as have you announced, I will talk about the ICOMOS International Charter for Cultural Heritage Tourism 2021 for a new era of cultural and responsible tourism. And I would like to start reminding that, as you many know, the ICOMOS Committee on Cultural Tourism decided to review the 1999 Charter in its annual meeting in Florence in order to update it to almost 20 years of tourism and heritage doctrine evolution, to confront mass tourism impacts on heritage places and communities, and to address right-based issues relating to tourism on sustainable developments, such as gentrification and displacement, lack of benefit shared, etc. In 2020, the COVID-19 effects and the tourism collapse reoriented the draft, which focused on cultural heritage protection and community resilience through the participatory governance of the heritage commons used by tourism. The third and final draft of this new charter has been approved just a few days ago by the ICOMOS Scientific Council and Advisory Committee statutory meetings, so we hope that the charter will be finally adopted by ICOMOS in the General Assembly next year. The 2021 Charter calls for transformative change towards regenerative development paradigm that recalibrates the perpetual economic growth-based approach to cultural tourism. Against cultural properties economic exploitation within tourism, this charter claims for their consideration as heritage commons which deserve to be responsibly enjoyed and shared through participatory governance, people-centered and place-based approaches. Against tourism purely economic consideration, this charter focuses on tourism as a tool for enjoyment, emotion, experience, and community resilience. Beyond the 1999 pioneer focus on community involvement, the 2021 Charter calls for reinforcement of rights and participatory governance, so it targets directly all cultural and heritage tourism stakeholders, stating that the responsible management of tourism is a shared responsibility of governments, tour operators, tourism businesses, destination managers and marketing organizations, site management authorities, land use planners, heritage and tourism professionals, civil society, and visitors. The 2021 Charter is placed in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals and 2030 Agenda, climate action, right-based approaches over tourism and disruptions. Hence, concepts of relevance introduced in the 2021 Charter include heritage commons, stewardship, and participatory governance, the vulnerability, resilience, and adaptation on communities when dealing with tourism, and capacity development, carrying capacity, and monitoring as the essential conditions of responsible tourism. Of course, it does so through several principles, of which we have 7 principles in the Charter, of which Principle 4 to Principle 7 are especially connected to the topic that we are dealing with today. But introducing these new concepts and these new principles, it of course poses several new challenges. The first of which is really considering heritage as commons versus heritage as property and economic resource, because that means that it belongs to a group and it needs to be governed by all those groups. So participatory governance, which is the democratic mechanism intended to involve citizens in public policy-making processes. This needs the inclusion of all kinds of communities in cultural tourism decision-making, considering expert professionals, host communities and visitors, but also a wide range of local, economic and political actors whose interests
2 minutes are left.
Okay. I would say economic and political actors, different communities whose interests are diverse and often opposite. So we need urgently to reinforce capacity building in the cultural heritage domain and on responsible tourism among all these communities and different actors, so their participatory governance is real, fair, balanced, and able to increase and defend heritage preservation. So my question for the audience, although this is not my last slide, but my question for this audience and today is, how can ICOMOS contribute to capacity building in order to enhance cultural heritage preservation and its shared and responsible enjoyment while increasing communities' resilience and awareness? And moreover, is ICOMOS well trained to facilitate participatory governance? I'm very worried about those questions because answering to them properly is key for ICOMOS' future, considering the unexpected consequences that tourism, climate emergency, and other global issues can have if cultural heritage and communities are not sufficiently prepared and empowered to confront them. So to conclude, I would like to stress that the Charter addresses participatory governance, considering ICOMOS as one of those communities itself, a community that defends a more humanistic, fair, solidary, and sensible approach to tourism. Quoting Bollier and Helfrich, we understand, and we would like you to understand this charter as a way to take action on problems that the market or state are ignoring, and as an explicit declaration of mutual intent and ongoing commitment. The power of the charter will derive, of course, from the breadth and depth of support that commands in everyday practice. So we invite ICOMOS members, partner organizations, and all tourism stakeholders to consult, disseminate, and use the ICTC Charter 2021 at the ICOMOS ICTC webpage. And we will seek for its implementation with regional guidelines and through specific programs, such as the ICOMOS, ICROM, and IUCN Panorama Partnership and World Heritage Leadership Initiative, and the UNESCO World Heritage and Sustainable Tourism Program and its Visitor Management Assessment and Strategy 2, which is the subject of the next speaker. So I really thank you very much now for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Celia. And for all the participants, this is a workshop, so we really want inputs from you. So do ponder on the question raised by Celia as I invite Cicely to start her presentation.
Thank you. Yes. So thank you very much for this opportunity. My presentation is titled Enhancing Resilience and Adaptive Capacity Through Visitor Management. Communities are highly complex and distributed networks of individuals, businesses, and organizations. Well-functioning and sustainable communities have a diverse economy where goods and services are exchanged between community members, meeting basic needs and contributing well-being and development. Anticipating future disruptions, directly or indirectly related to climate change, there is an urgent need to strengthen resilience, adaptive and transformative capacities among community members, including rights holders and stakeholders. Tourism can contribute economic development, but also change the social fabric of a place. Sector success and growth can reduce economic diversity and create tourism-dependent communities vulnerable to risks and disruptions affecting the sector. Where economic leakages and imports are high, monetary supply and means of exchange could dry up. COVID-19 demonstrated that tourism can collapse and quickly deprive communities of income, liquidity, and thereby sustainability. World heritage are global attractions and nominations are often economically motivated. Once inscribed, state parties, that is the national governments, take on the overall government's responsibility, which by default is hierarchical. As key resources in the tourism sector, world heritage often come under pressure from economic exploitation and overuse. Their sustainable use and protection rely on local stewardship. Irrespective of private or public ownership, ignoring world heritage, including their intangible status as commons, resources shared by many rights holders and in need of appropriate governance, could in fact increase community vulnerability. Elinor Ostrom, recipient of the Nobel Prize in Economics for her work on the governance of commons, dedicated her later career to polycentric governance, a distributed form of leadership and citizenship that protects the integrity of a system and its multiple centers of decision-making, where each center has a certain degree of autonomy. So how could a polycentric approach possibly enhance resilience and adaptive capacities while strengthening the stewardship of world heritage? The UNESCO World Heritage Visitor Management Assessment and Strategy Tool, in short VMAST, is a free and voluntary tool supporting World Heritage Site Management Authorities in their efforts to manage visitation and tourism for the protection of heritage values while localizing sustainable development goals. VMAST is a tool for inclusive and proactive visitor management adapted to local needs and resources. Its application is initiated by site management authorities for establishing a visitor management baseline. Next, key stakeholders should be invited to help prioritize management objectives and target indicators to bring forward in an integrated strategy development or revision of existing strategies. Thereafter, VMAS can be used to develop a smart strategy and action plan integrating regenerative practices and activities. By facilitating an open and inclusive strategy development process, placing World Heritage at the center, collaborating stakeholders and partners would extend the strategy objectives beyond the World Heritage Sites Management Organization and thereby enhance stewardship. While participatory tourism development and visitor management has the potential to distribute efforts and responsibilities, it would likely not be enough to strengthen resilience towards climate risk and economic disruptions. Mostly remaining a blind spot in our discussions and efforts, this is an opportunity to bring focus onto money as a social construct. Since the gold standard was abolished in 1971, the majority of new money has been issued as private debt and thereby underpinning the inherent unsustainability of our current perpetual economic growth-based development paradigm. Besides the need to increase our technological and economic literacy to understand the value of heritage and risks of further exploitation, specifically in data-driven economic models, we could also potentially use this new literacy to identify partners unlocking new and transformative potentials. As an economist greatly concerned by how culture and heritage is played into the growth economy, I have gained new energy and hope discovering how indigenous and polycentric ways to govern scarce resources practiced across communities are concerned are inspiring social currency innovation, supporting connectivity, inclusivity, economic just transition, local transformation, and resilience. WETS, the World Heritage Exchange Trading System, proposed and incubated through World Heritage Catalysis and including an open marketplace and accessible unit of exchange, is set out to provide an economic infrastructure supporting stewardship of World Heritage. As a mutual credit system applying time as a unit of account, WETS embed values of inclusion, reciprocity, and trust, all values that help build and sustain thriving communities. WETS could be applied rewarding people for their time and contribution, supporting strategy development, as well as in strategy implementation, creating exchange circuits around strategic objectives. It could also be applied to reward volunteering and incentivize specific efforts in organizations such as ICOMOS and the engagement strategy. Designed for the protection of World Heritage and implemented through deliberate visitor management, WETS could support collaborative exchanges among local tourism stakeholders, building polycentric networks and strengthen local stewardship. Made available to anyone willing to accept it and extending across distributed networks of autonomous individuals, businesses, and organizations. WETS could grow a people-centered economic infrastructure and means of exchange decoupled from any specific economic sector and thereby potentially enhance community resilience and allow the consideration of a more regenerative pathway. So if you're interested to follow or involvement in this effort, this is done through World Heritage Catalysis, and my research and my question, which is also the same as my PhD research question, it is what are the barriers to polycentric governance in the stewardship of World Heritage, and how could technologies help overcome these barriers? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cecily. So we now have time for your introspections on this very innovative idea of a social technology where, people are remunerated for the contribution of their time and developing alternate systems. So now we open the session for questions and discussion for 5 minutes. So you can raise your hand or write in chat. If you raise your hand, we'll unmute you.
I could also say that I have a poster in the poster session, which it's also elaborate on VETS, and I will post my email and links in the chat. So in case you want to get in contact.
Cecilie, there is a question from Deirdre that how can VETS be used as a unit of exchange? If you can explain a bit more.
Yes, thank you very much. As I mentioned, VETS applies already existing technology used across other local exchange trading systems. And it would include a marketplace, but also a token or a unit of exchange. So, and it's based on a mutual credit system. And to get the definition right, I'm reading here, mutual credit is a system in which the currency necessary to mediate the transaction is created at the same time of the transaction as a corresponding credit and debit in the balances of the two parties. So it's basically a circuit where the participants are able to share, but it needs the network to be big enough to function.
There is another question that, in regions where there is non-democratic political parties, will polycentric governance be a challenge?
Well, polycentric governance is not something which is implemented top down. It's actually more of a democratic movement that could emerge through the use of technology. And to what extent that will be welcomed by all nations and governments, that is one of the big questions. But yeah, with technologies and available and democratic technologies, I think the polycentric approaches are emerging, and it's about how do we contribute to bridging and ensuring that polycentricity bring forward the values and the benefits of a more hierarchical governance system also could bring. I see that I'm getting a few direct messages. I will attend to them in the chat after this Q&A session. That's all right.
Deirdre has another question for you, Cecilie. Deirdre, would you like to ask the question yourself? You can unmute.
Thank you, Ananya. Really, I was wondering, because clearly this has most impact where it is broadly and widely disseminated and engaged with. So I was just wondering, with World Heritage, are any of the other ABs, the advisory bodies to UNESCO, also engaged or signed into this, into WETS?
Well, this is still in a conceptual mode. So since I'm a member of ICOMOS, I'm sharing this with ICOMOS first. But yeah, it is exposed, but it's not yet something where that has been launched. So I would very much welcome the advisory bodies to come together and yeah, co-create what VETS could be.
Okay, so sort of a strategy for rolling it out would be another stage of the whole thing to understand. Yeah, great. Thank you, Cecilie.
And if the advisory bodies would be interested, that strategy would look different than if it was mostly developed through engagement with at local levels. So, but yeah, the more the better. We won't need to bring. Complexity is welcomed, and it's complexity and the diversity that will make such a system successful.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no more questions, then I'll invite our next presenter, Dr. Shem, to start your presentation.
Sorry about that. My name is Dr. Shev Maingi. I will be making a presentation on the models of governance in Kenya, tourism, climate change.
And if you can please move to the slideshow mode.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much. I will be making a presentation on the models of governance in Kenya, tourism, climate change, and community resilience. And as I start my presentation, tourism destinations all over the world are currently facing numerous challenges in adapting their governance approaches to withstand the climate crisis. And from the 2015 Paris Agreement, shifted to a more inclusive climate governance system as opposed to the Kyoto Protocol. And according to the 2015 Paris Agreement, there was a need to address the climate problem, the climate change problem in a different way and to a particular extent in a more polycentric manner. So the current debate in tourism has shifted from destination management to destination governance due to the complexity of the challenges facing the tourism industry. As we know, the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the climate crisis, are one of the biggest challenges facing the global tourism sector. So in the global tourism industry, in order for us to address the environmental changes, we need to really shift to a more sustainable, a more inclusive, a more integrated governance system. So this presentation seeks to explore the relevance of polycentric governance in building resilience in cultural and heritage tourism destinations towards climate change. Further, it seeks to examine how to strengthen the connections between people, places, and the planet, and therefore contributing to the well-being of the local communities, building their resilience towards climate change. Now, the nature of climate change has shown us that we cannot have one linear solution to a global problem. We have to address the spatial, temporal nature, the transboundary nature of climate change, as well as the socio-ecological implications. And for us to be able to address these variability attributes, we need to change our approaches towards climate change governance. And considering the titanic climate change challenges, destinations need to confront this climate problem with policy decisions that will guarantee communities' resilience. We've had various approaches, from the top-down vertical approach that emphasized on the global character of the climate problem, to the decentralized approach that focused on the concerted efforts of nation states. And now we have the polycentric approach that focuses on the plurality or collaboration between autonomous units that are accountable to others through a process of competition, conflict resolution, and cooperation, courtesy of Ostrom 2014. So when you talk about polycentricity, we talk about the multiplicity of decision centers, the ability of a system to address problems at different levels, from the national, regional, international, as well as the local level. And this multiplicity of decision centers create autonomous decision-making layers that are central to the problems facing that particular area. And they have both common goals as well as individual goals. There is also that institutional framework that really builds onto the multiplicity of decision centers, therefore, focusing on the particular jurisdictions, coming up with their own unique rule designs, collective choice, and also the ability to align between the needs of that particular jurisdiction and the national and regional needs, as well as the global needs. And the spontaneity or evolutionary nature of the governance, to the extent that that form of governance is able to live, it's able to have a life of its own, as opposed to the current monocentric governance approaches that really focus on term limits and are not able to address the issues conclusively. So polycentricity, as discussed, has been seen as a mode of converging knowledge, technology, societies, interdisciplinarity, to create a convergence ecosystem that can be able to address the complex problems that face a particular industry. And in this particular context, our heritage industry. And that involves multiple institutions, multiple actors, different levels, different sectors, and different resources. To tackle the climate problem, it is important for us to establish a suitable and equitable balance between environmental, ecological, economic, and socio-cultural aspects of cultural tourism development, and the need to re-examine our governance systems to make sure that they are able to guarantee sustainable development. In the Kenyan case, we've had a number of World Heritage Sites, for example, Lake Turkana National Parks, which was inscribed as a heritage site in 1997, one of the longest living histories on the earth. And Lake Turkana National Park contributed to the understanding of human ancestry and is world renowned to be the cradle of mankind. But Lake Turkana National Park is really going through a number of challenges that will, that is threatening the wetland ecosystems, the traditional livelihoods, the living heritage, as the cradle of mankind. And due to the infrastructure, the level and extent of infrastructure development, irrigation, droughts and dam developments along the Omo River, and many other challenges, including the oil exploration within Turkana Lake Basin, and amongst other issues. And as we look at these challenges, we realize that the climate change is posing a risk to the human rights, to the rights of the people in that basin, the rights to life, rights to health, food, water, and the pastoralist communities, the pastoralist population amongst the poorest in that particular area. In 2016, the government of Kenya came up with a policy on devolved system of governance. One indication that the government felt there was a need to move away from a monocentric approach of governing heritage to a more devolved system of governance, of governing cultural resources. And to a particular extent, there was the understanding that we had to look for local solutions. And to a particular extent, polycentric governance will continue that process. And we hope the current initiatives by NOREB, the North Rift Economic Bloc, in developing a polycentric governance system within the within the North Rift economic bloc will be a way to enable us to preserve and conserve that rich heritage that exists in that particular area. I'll talk a bit about that. Also, another example is the Lamu Old Town. Lamu Old Town is one of the oldest settlement, the oldest, town in East Africa. The town is one of the best preserved Swahili heritage areas within East Africa, but the buildings are well preserved using indigenous technologies. But with the current developments in Lamu, which include the Lamu port, there is a coal plant project, and as well as the Southern Sudan-Ethiopia transport corridor, amongst the biggest challenge, which is the climate change crisis. We see a lot of challenges facing the Lamu Old Town. And indeed, polycentric governance will be ideal towards preserving that rich heritage that is Lamu's cultural heritage, and to be able to improve the well-being of the local communities and enhance their climate resilience. We also have the Mijikenda Kaya forests, which is historically a biocultural heritage territory within the Kenyan coast, and that has been under threat from climate change, and that has created serious ecological and socioeconomic conditions for the local communities. But the Kaya forests, have shown that communities can be able to, the sub-tribes of the Mijikenda can be able to conserve and protect the forest. And that has actually indicated that a polycentric approach towards protecting our forest resources, including, for example, the RED+ initiatives. Polycentricism is really welcome in protecting and conserving our bioheritage territories in East Africa. And indeed, I will talk a bit about that as we move on. So in terms of polycentric governance models, examples that I can give, for example, we have the North Rift Economic Bloc, which is a regional economic carcass of counties comprising of Turkana, Uasin Gishu, Baringo, West Pokot, Nandi, Trans Nzoia, Samburu, Elgeyo Marakwet. And these counties have come up with a collaborative, polycentric approach towards environmental conservation, towards climate change mitigation, and enhancing community resilience through tourism. And that is a classic example of a Kenyan solution to the Kenyan problem. A classic example of a local solution to a local problem that has a global impact. And that is what I would say, it is important for us to think about that polycentric model towards addressing both common goals as well as the local problem. We've had the RED+ solutions, reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation projects. And in Kenya, I'm glad, yes, that we have a number of projects that adopt the polycentric RED+ approach towards addressing the climate crisis. So just to give in conclusion, we really need to address the issue of exposure and sensitivity of the local communities. According to Calgaro, Kate, and Dale, there is need for us to think about exposure and the sensitivity of our tourism system to the to the crisis that is before us. And we need to be able to develop adaptive responses and adaptive mechanism to be able to address this crisis and ensure that our social ecological system is resilient to this climate problem. So in conclusion, polycentric governance is ideal to building resilience towards climate change in African context. Measures to adopt REDD+ in Kenya has shown that there is a positive reception of polycentric approaches towards dealing with deforestation and forest degradation. There is need to build an institutional framework policy guideline on polycentric governance in Kenya. And I think I will stop there for the sake of time. Thank you. So in my question, what could be the role of indigenous communities in enhancing climate resilience to polycentric governance of heritage resources? Thank you very much. So these are some of my reference as we move on.
Thank you, Shem. Our timekeeper, Yunku, is very nice and sweet, and she's informing you at the end of 8 minutes that your time is over. Yes. And now it's 15 minutes. So actually, the whole discussion time has also been taken up. So I request the other speakers, stick to your time so that we can have a discussion. Shem, your presentation is so interesting, and I myself would like to ask you a few questions, but in the interest of time, I'll save the question and discussion for the end of the end session. And I'll now invite Dr. Ruren Zhang, Associate Professor of School of Architecture and Urban Planning, to start his presentation. Ruren, please stick to 8 minutes so that we can have a discussion right after your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Okay, thank you, Ananya, and for your organizing this workshop, and to giving us opportunity to talking about in different backgrounds. Today, my presentation is about indigenous views on climate changes and the value of cultural landscape, a case study on cultural landscape of Honghe-Hani rice terraces. Well, this presentation is part of the third phase of the ICOMOS and IUCN connecting practice, as the cultural landscape of Honghe-Hani rice terraces was selected as part of it. It aims to explore the better integrates the assessment method to connect culture, nature, and social value of heritage sites. My presentation explores indigenous people's perception on the World Heritage listing of Hani rice terraces. It also discusses how traditional management method can be most effectively supported and maintained within the framework of World Heritage. Well, on June 22, 2013, the Honghe-Hani rice terraces was successfully inscribed on the World Heritage List as a cultural landscape type. As you see on the screen, this is the location. The rice terraces are located on the south bank of the Honghe River in southern Yunnan province. According to the inscription text, the Hani rice terraces inscribed on the categorization 3 and the 5, and which is a cultural landscape with the most representative and concentrated rice terraces as a whole, including the water source forest, irrigation system, ethnic village, and other elements on which they depended. Here is the nominated areas and the buffer zone as shown on the screens. Well, today I would like to address it is about Hani rice terraces, the traditional management method which we call the four elements: the forest, village, terraces, and a river system, and forming a system of agriculture, forestry, and water distribution, and unique living, social, economic, and religious systems. The honey rice terraces reflect the ancient Chinese people respect for and protection and skillful use of the natural environment, and are a very important example of harmony, consistent between man and nature. Because of its unique, these four elements: forest, villages, terraces, and river system. It has a very good water holding and regulating functions, which is, we're talking about climate changes, which is the traditional manners to control in the climate changes. From 2008 to 2012, in Yunnan province suffers from a rare 5 years dry period actually. The honey rice terraces fields still maintain very good production functions during that period. So therefore, we can see that the rice terraces are one of the best research areas for the study of drought, which using the traditional management method. Well, during the connecting practice conducting in 2013, November 2013, I have an interview team interview a total of 86 people for the survey, and with different questions, with the semi-structured and structured interview questions, with different kind of stakeholders. But today we only focus on local residents. We interview about 50 local residents during that period. The outstanding feature of the honey terrace, also the main points and the difficulties in the conservation and the management, is especially under the influence of the climate changes and the economic globalization, which also brings great challenges to the conservation of the culture landscape of honey rice terraces. And according to my interview with local residents, when I asked them what wood heritage listing has brought to honey rice terraces, and you can see from the table that nearly 2/3 of people mention about negative problems such as loss of agricultural population and the traditional honey culture lost. And also they mentioned 1/3 of them mentioned positive issues such as cultural pride, infrastructure development, enhance the quality of life, and equity between men and women.
2 minutes are left.
Okay. And in terms of the first negative issues, the loss of the agricultural populations, we can see that 1/3 of the interviewees mentioned that the problem of young people go out to work in big cities, and many cities are empty, which is serious. So accounting for 66 of the total number. So since the harvest brought by the terraces can only sustain daily life, many young people choose to work in the cities. And so you can see these 4 examples which are interviewed with local residents. Because of this, the lack of the adequate maintenance of the honey terraces by young people make it possible for washout terraces face to climate changes, such as extreme water, weather, such as heavy rains, storms, and the problem of no one to repair them. The 4 elements of the honey terraces, as I mentioned, also need to be passed on and maintained by each generations. These 2 pictures shows that in June 2018, rainfall caused a landslide damaged 115,000 square kilometers of honey rice terraces because of lack of the young people. Those many areas still, no one just repairs them because of the lack of young people. And another significant issue is traditional horticulture loss, which was mentioned by 17 times, accounting for 1/3 of the total number. Yeah. Local residents worry that Hali language and other Hali intangible heritage, such Hali's marriage, sailing, forest protection, children breeding practice will be lost. As the younger generation choose to work outside, the children were unable to influence by traditional Hali culture, and the local middle and high school also lack of Hali culture education. As they also mentioned several positive issues, such as water listing, bring to cultural pride as shown on the screen, and
we may have lost Mr. Zhang. Ananya?
Yeah. Shall we give him a minute? Just let's see whether he's back. Just let's give him a minute. Okay. Yeah, it's a pity because it's so interesting and we all have questions for him.
He has just joined back.
He has joined. Good. Yes, Rural. Are you back?
The internet connection is just cut off.
Yeah, you continue from where you were.
Okay. It's only a few more pages. Yeah.
But you have already taken up around 10 minutes, so keep some time for people to ask you questions. So finish in a minute.
Okay, yeah, 1 minute. Yeah, and they mentioned several positive issues. But one of the issues I would like to stress is the equity between men and women as shown on the screen. So in the eyes of locals, World Heritage brings positive and negative factors. What we need to think about is how to amplify the impact of the positive factors while addressing the problems caused by the negative factors. As long as we can solve the problems of the rural population loss and the loss of the horticulture, the existing traditional management method of terraces field can be maintained, which is also the best way to deal with climate changes. And so my questions I proposed is that, how the traditional management method and the local participation in the management contribute to climate resilience. And so here is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruran. There is already a question in the chat where Celia wants to know, what were the reasons that behind perception of World Heritage nomination as negative. Would you like to add a few comments on that?
Okay. The thing is that because when the World Heritage listing taking place, the area is extremely poor, and local residents hoping that World Heritage can bring economic benefits, can bring more tourists to their sites. However, sometimes it takes some time, and because some policy, I think because the Chinese government and local government already made some good policies, but it is still waiting some times to take in place and to effective. So that's the reason some of the two-thirds of the people are not quite happy because they consider some of the because I also asking them about whether they support World Heritage listing. Nearly 100% of them support it, but you know, some of their expectation not fulfilled. So that's the reason some of them are not very happy, and they consider that water listing can you know dramatic increase the tourism revenue, and young people can you know stay, and can also facilitate the intangible heritage. But since it's happening slowly, I can see that some policy is very good. As I would like to show, you know, my PowerPoint, the last 3 pages is some local government and national government policy, which is good, but still needs some time to take place. Thank you.
Rural Dahlia has asked whether you have encountered similar challenges of scarcity of irrigation resources due to climate change. In her area, in arid areas, she has noted that where water supplies are limited, rice agriculture is now banned. In that context?
Yeah, sorry.
Dahlia, would you like to ask the question yourself?
Yeah.
Yes, hello. Thank you for your presentation. My research area is in the oasis in arid region in Egypt, and where rice agriculture have been a traditional cultivation and practice. Now it is banned because of the scarcity of water resources, and the local community are suffering from this. So I'm wondering if you have experienced the same problem in your case study, where the water supplies are challenged, or challenging also the practice of agriculture, rice agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dahlia. And I think that is a very good question. But we are facing with, I think, the different problems in hardy rice terraces areas. And I think actually this system is, I think, is very fit and to cope with the climate changes. Because as I mentioned, during the dry seasons, during 2010, because of the hardy rice system is that 4 elements: forest, terraces, villages, and river. And the forest can hold the water in the mountains, and they use the tunnels, and which they also have the intangible heritage called Hani Guge. And just like the Chinese lunar calendar, to using their traditional Hani calendar to conduct this traditional, how to worship the forest, and how to, this ceremony, how to, introduce the water to the village, and then to the terraces, and they also feed ducks with, and fishes in the terraces, and then into the river. So that is a very good sustainable, system. So even during the dry season, but the forests have the capacity to holding water. So that's the reason if young people can stay in, and they can, but stay in, they need to, satisfy with their salary, maybe from their products, maybe from the tourism development, and then to sustain this whole system, including the intangible heritage. But without young people, I'm not sure how this can be sustained. Even this can sustain, it's just like maybe the government, had forced them, or maybe have some team, the government teams, and to specific do this work. But that is the totally different things. It's change their culture. So I think the best way is just keep the young people, maintain their culture, maintain this intangible heritage. And, this can be, solve from the dry season, and even in the rainy seasons, young people can restore the terraces and to maintain this in a good way. So I hope this answers your question.
Thank you, Ruren. And if there are more questions, please feel free to write in the chat. We'll have a discussion session at the end. And now that we have eaten rice, we need some Mediterranean food, right? So Sophia, over to you.
Thank you. I'm going to share. Can you see it now? So thank you so much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with all of you today. So I'm talking about the traditional community knowledge and practices, how they can help tackle climate change. And I will use the case for the Mediterranean diet in reducing food waste applied to the tourism food industry in the Algarve. So first of all, why food waste? Why would we bring food waste to our table? So first of all, because it's one third of the food produced in the world goes to waste, and that's already a good reason to talk about it. It's the equivalent to 1.3 billion tons, worth around $1 trillion US. Those are numbers of 2011, and that has increased in 2.5 billion tons in 2021. It's also the third cause and considered the third solution for tackling climate change. So why do we waste so much food? There are many reasons. One of them can be the unsustainable production and consumption practice from richer developed countries. Also the inefficient production and preservation practices, all together with lack of infrastructure from poor developing countries. And I believe also the big disconnection that nowadays most of us have with nature and food production processes. So if food loss and waste were a country, it will be the third largest greenhouse gas emitters after China and the United States. So it's a huge problem because there's more to food waste than wasted food. We have land and water that are used to waste food. We have soil, seeds, we have food miles, we have methane, we have biodiversity loss, we have time, fuel, waste, CO2 emissions, we have inequality, we have pollution, hunger, and climate change. So it's an environmental, social, and economic impacts that are so strong and related to food waste. And among all of those reasons, we still have 111 million people, 811 million people still go hungry in the world today. So these numbers have decreased for the last decades, but they are again going up, due especially for the last 2 years regarding COVID, regarding conflict and climate change. So food waste is, with no doubt, a significant contributor to global warming. Around 8 to 10% of global greenhouse emissions are associated with food that is not consumed, is produced but not consumed, and ends up rotting in landfills producing toxic methane. The FAO in 2020 said that consumers must be encouraged to shift to nutrition and safe diets with a low environmental footprint. That's the reason why we need a behavior shift. But how can cultural, sustainable, and responsible tourism support this shift? How can we bring this shift to the table and start working on it? So in our charter, Principle 7 says that we must integrate climate action and sustainability measures in the management of cultural tourism and cultural heritage. And I will pick up the last sentence in this slide. Tourism activities must minimize their greenhouse gas emissions. So again, how can we, in cultural, sustainable, and responsible tourism, support this shift? And my answer, my personal answer that I bring to the table today is with traditional knowledge and with the case of the Mediterranean diet. So the Mediterranean diet comes from the Greek diaita, and it's a way of life. It's not only food, but it's a way of life. And it's inscribed since 2013 on the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity, and includes Cyprus, Croatia, Spain, Greece, Italy, Morocco, and Portugal as the countries subscribed, but obviously it's the entire area of the Mediterranean region. Here you have the new pyramid for the Mediterranean diet that you can see includes food, ways of production, but also exercise, sociability. And I will describe a little bit more concise what is the Mediterranean diet. So in related with food, let's say we have the bread, the fruit, nuts, grains, and olive oil. We have the moderate consumption of dairy products, meat and wine. We have in seasoning more herbs and less salt. We have the consumption of fish and seafood, water as the main drink throughout the day, frugality, simplicity, and reuse of the leftovers, seasonality, and high consumption of fresh vegetables produced locally. And I will emphasize these last 2 points. And in the way of life, we have also eating together, because that is the foundation of social relations between all ages, the table, the hospitality, the neighborliness, intercultural dialogue, the creativity and diversity. Also the respect for the natural cycles and seasonality of local products, the craftsmanship and use of traditional objects like baskets, pottery and glass, again, all recyclable or reusable. The woman's role, the importance of mothers and grandmothers on transmitting the traditions, the knowledge, the skills, and the importance of traditional markets. And I will bring this last one to the table today, because I do believe that our local traditional markets are the embodiment of our Mediterranean diet. And how can we bring then the polycentric approach to this discussion? So the traditional market is in itself a network of different actors and connections, all related with food, in this case, with traditions, with heritage. And so inside the market itself, we have all these connections already going on. So we have the producers, the different stalls, the restaurants, the coffee shops, the supermarkets, the consumers. In the case of the market in Faro, we even have an urban garden up in the roof, and the tourisms that come and enjoy the products, enjoy the connection, and even are some local restaurants and associations providing experiences, like a chef goes with the tourists to the market, they buy the products, they go to the restaurant, and they cook the dish, the traditional dish, in this case, the cataplana. The market is indeed, and I believe if you are from around the Mediterranean, you know it's the heart of the community. So, and what is food tourism? Well, food tourism, following the World Food Travel Association, is the act of traveling for a taste of place in order to get a sense of place. Nothing better than go to a market to see this and have this. So what is the action plan and the idea that I have to implement together with the traditional market, restaurants and hotels in the region of the Algarve? Is to bring forward some guidelines and some practices that we can apply. So using the Hotel Kitchen Toolkit that was produced by the Worldwide Fund and the American Hotel and Lodging Association, and the principles that I myself learned and applied during my years as a volunteer at EPA Food Waste in Ireland, bring this together to our case in the Algarve. The idea is already with Tertulia Algarvia, that is a restaurant and a cultural association, starting a pilot at the beginning of 2022, by using these models, these approaches, create guidelines so we can bring them forward to the Tourism Association in the Algarve, working with the restaurants, hotels, and the local market. That is, as I said, a microorganism of all this, and that can connect from the producers to the consumers and the tourism. And I want to finish with this because I think it represents very well what we must do forward. Calvin Trilling says, the most remarkable thing, sorry, just a second, it's the last one. The most remarkable thing about my mother is that for 30 years, she served the family nothing but leftovers. The original meal has never been found. Here we know the original meals, they are gorgeous, and we can really apply the leftovers so we can reduce food waste and have a less imprint in our hotels, restaurants, and even the traditional markets. We can use them also to make sensitivation to the people that go there. So I believe they are in the core of this approach. And my question would be, how can we self-organize around our heritage, in this case with local markets and, for instance, cultural festivals, to create more local networks and connections to support our communities' resilience regarding climate change? Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. In fact, in the chat, Deirdre has shared an excellent example of self-organization. So if you have any questions for Sophia, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask. Or write in the chat. Deirdre, would you like to share more about, the example you gave of the young entrepreneur?
Well, Ananya, it's just a small example. It's not particularly, it's not derived from ICOMOS, but it is, it's offered online. So people, and particularly the young people who find those links online, my kids actually, they shop and they don't know what's in their box, but there's always some fresh produce. There's stuff that will otherwise go to waste. So sometimes they might get a cream cake or something like that, but they will also get real food, and they pay a fraction of the cost of what they would be buying normally, and it doesn't go to waste. So it's an example. It's a partnership that would be worthwhile exploring when we, if there were those sorts of partnerships, I think would, give us well, encouragement. They have set up these, and it doesn't preclude us from setting up our own, but, just a thought, just an example.
Thank you. Okay, we didn't get much time after Shem presented, so I'm kind of opening up now the session. So requesting all of you to feel free to ask questions to any one of the speakers. Shem, may I ask you that you have shared such a wonderful example of, engaging the indigenous people and having polycentric governance mechanisms developed. How about, managing conflicts in jurisdiction or overlapping areas of, governance? Would you like to reflect on that?
Yes, I would talk about, for example, I give an example of the Ilemi Triangle area, the border between South Sudan, Ethiopia, and Kenya. And there was a classic example in Turkana where they signed the communities in those communities, in the neighboring communities in South Sudan, Ethiopia, and Kenya, signed a peace accord. And they signed a peace accord. They share the same heritage. They share the same culture. And they signed a peace accord, I think in 2002. And it was really an excellent example that communities can work together towards finding more solutions to really protecting their heritage. They came up with what we call the Turkana Festival, which is an important highlight in our tourism, in our Kenya's tourism scene. Every year they have a tourism festival. It's called the Turkana Festival, and it has become very popular in that region. And it has really helped to stop the conflicts happening in the borders of Kenya and South Sudan, as well as Ethiopia. And I think that is a classic example that, heritage can bring people together through that cultural festival. And it can also be an agent for peace building. And tourism is also an agent of peace in that particular area.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Today, Celia raised a very important question. I think she gave two aspects of it. One is how, as ICOMOS, we can contribute to capacity building for, developing polycentric mechanisms of governance. And also, within ICOMOS, do we need capacity building ourselves? I'd invite all our speakers to share their reflections on this question.
Yeah, and Ananya, can I say something?
Sure.
Yeah, because what I'm pretty worried about this question. It's not only about how can ICOMOS can enhance capacity development, as you say, but with which communities? What are the communities we need to address, and are we really trained to do that? Because I think that we are going deepening and deepening on this question, but ICOMOS has never reflected as its actor as a facilitator or as a trainer. I'm very worried about that. I would like a lot to hear about your thoughts.
Please feel free to speak. I'm requesting all the speakers to reflect on this.
If I may, Celia, you specifically addressing capacity building and training. But if now as we are addressing polycentricity, maybe it would be more useful to discuss how ICOMOS could lend itself or enhance learning exchanges across the network. So it's not like a one-dimensional approach to capacity building, but rather developing into a learning organization, which is more of a emerging type of learning that could take place in a more organic way. And I think that's what is already happening, but maybe we do not fully recognize that dimension and that part of the capacity building that we're actually doing already. And maybe then what we've started today, it could somehow bring a new perspective of how we talk around enhancing our knowledge, not only through capacity building, but learning exchanges.
Yeah, you're right, Cecilia. That would be very clever, because ICOMOS is present at universities, but this is not the whole of society. And what we are claiming now is that everybody should be capacity built to take part of tourism decisions and decisions on cultural heritage. But the problem is that the majority of society has not the sufficient knowledge still to take part of those decisions. And as you know, when Margaret, who is around, and Fergus, when we were drafting the charter, we discussed a lot about that question, because it's a real problem.
I see we have a question. Nupur.
Thank you. This was a very, very interesting session. I'd just like to add one thing. I feel that we're always looking for opportunities to communicate the importance of cultural heritage in climate action to others. You know, and I've always been, I've been thinking that how do we, I mean, there are so, like Roran's case, I'm very familiar with and very close to, but so, you know, you have this whole knowledge, you know that, you know, the people know about it, etc. But and we as professionals are learning about it, but how are we communicating it to others? And this is something I raised in the session yesterday as well. And today, after hearing all of your presentations and things, I'm really seeing that tourism, but not the way we look at tourism as a word, a concept today, but tourism may be the key to communicate wisdom about how we are dealing with climate action to people in general. Next question would be, you know, how then are we going to be redefining tourism? How are we going to be you know, what does tourism really mean? So I think for me, it's been a very interesting discussion. Thank you very much. To see that you have a relevant role to play in communication to people, just people in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Nupur. Indeed, Shem had also shared that, you know, how tourism is helping the communities also to come together. Okay, now my question to the speakers and also those in audience, what do you think are the top 3 barriers to achieving this? And omitting the aspect of, you know, political aspect, you know, assuming, you know, that problem is taken care of, I'd like to hear your reflections. Like, what are really the barriers to achieving this?
If I may.
Yeah. Yes.
In my case, with food waste, it's something very interesting that is no one ever has food waste. And that's something that I have seen during my time as a volunteer with Food Waste Ireland. Whenever we are in a space explaining food waste, people always say, no, we don't have. I don't have food waste at my home. No one has ever. Even the restaurants, the association I was working with at Tutorial Gavia, when I said I would like to have this pilot, work with you, and the first thing they say, oh, but we don't have food waste, or it's not so much food waste. And it's amazing because I had the same idea, but then to start the program, you have to control your food waste during 1 week. And I was surprised. I didn't have as much, but I don't know, for instance, salad was always going thrown away. Things like that, that then you are aware that you can work on it. And it's the same in a market, in a restaurant, wherever it is. So for me, the big issue is that. And in Ireland, what we used to do is that we go through composting. So we presented ourselves as master composters, and we prepare composting sites. We can help you composting at home, this kind of approach, and then we will go to food waste. And that was a way of people feel more receptive. Here we have a huge problem. I just arrived in Portugal around 3 months ago, and we don't have organic collection of waste, at least here in Faro, and it's the biggest city in the Algarve. That is huge. How can we go tackling food waste if we don't even get the solution to the opportunity to the people for using, compost to compost? So that's my challenge. We have to work together to reduce, and then go to the authorities and ask them to create these things. Of course, we can do composting sites, small, at home, whatever, but we need the big ones, like in Ireland, as already in other countries, that then there are things that are very difficult to compost in smaller sites, and you need industrial things.
Basically, waste management is a very important stakeholder in the scheme of things, and that needs to be taken care of. I see Cicely, you have raised your hand.
Can I?
And also,
thank you. I'm going to be quite provocative, and I may suggest that we could be part of the problem. And I was planning to say this quote by Elinor Ostrom. She says that there is no reason to believe that bureaucrats and politicians, and I would like to add experts, no matter how well-meaning, are better at solving problems than the people on the spot who have the strongest incentive to get the solution right. And I think for us to not always talk about the communication or finding solutions, maybe we could see ourselves as nodes in a more polycentric way to contribute to new ways of self-organizing towards a new and emerging solution, because towards climate change, there are no experts.
Thank you. Maria, you wanted to speak? Yeah, unmute yourself, please. Unmute yourself, please. You're muted.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm Maria José. I'm an architect. I'm Portuguese. Actually, I'm in Macau. And I am the president of the SBH group, the Shared Built Heritage group inside ICOMOS. I just want to tell a little bit of my experience as an architect, working with the local people and preserving heritage here. And I think it depends a lot on ourselves, because when you arrive in a place that is unknown for you, you need to engage with the local society, local members, and understand their vernacular architecture. Some architecture, of course, Portuguese influence, some architecture, of course, Chinese influence. And then through the different colloquies and symposiums, I met people in China. I visited China several times. I have friends in Wuhan and went there several times to help rebuilding and reconstructing several places with significance. So I think that with this, we also learn about climate change, because the old people, they have solutions for the problems, and we learn a lot with them. And nowadays we are in a way practicing and putting it in place. The important thing in the middle of all of this is communication. I think that ICOMOS should promote a channel for communication between the different working groups. We have different scientific groups. I attended the meetings yesterday, the meeting before, and so on. And I see that we all have the same interest. We want to preserve heritage. We want to preserve climate change. So the intercommunication between the groups is very important. And this depends on you, depends on me, depends on everybody. So let's make this network reality and work for it. This is what the message I want to say. Thank you.
So information sharing and self-organization of ICOMOS as a whole. Thanks for that suggestion. And I see excellent comments also in the chat, but we are running out of time. And Ruren has not spoken for a long time. So I'll go back to Ruren and ask him one question we had for this session. Is that, Ruren, what is the barrier, in getting this traditional knowledge, using the traditional knowledge and getting the indigenous communities involved? Because you've worked in the Hani terraces, would you have any observations on that?
Thank you, Ananya. And actually, I and Lupo, we are going to we were in Hani together in the Connecting Practice 3, and so I think the barrier I still confuse is, for instance, Hani language, the intangible heritage is very important to them, but as I communicate with them privately, for many of local government managers, also local residents, but they encourage the local people to speak their language, and to in their local school should embodies the intangible things to the primary school or high school or middle school system. But when we ask them, so where is your children? And they always said, my children is study in Beijing or study in big cities. And for, the site manager, and also, but they are also locals. And when we are young, we be educated that you need to be study hard and then go out to Beijing or to New York cities or to London. And how should we keep all the the local residents to stay? I think tourism may be a solution, because I also communicate with many of them. They have their sense of place, their sense of pride. They kind of consider World Heritage listing keep them is kind of the good things to keep them stay here. And but they also very generous about the the South France, about their the green the red, and they're producing red wine. They can benefit from their products. But in Hani rice terraces, they only benefit their product is white rice. It's not like the red wine in southern France. And but they told me if the tourism can maybe sustainable tourism development can bring them some money, even maybe just half of the money they go out compared to they go out to the big cities, they will need to stay. So that's the reason I think to developing the sustainable tourism may be a solution to keeping their in Hani rice terraces, keeping their sustain their intangible heritage.
Thank you, Ruren. I know there are more questions. I can see Pasant, you raise your hand, but we have run out of time. And naturally, it was such an interesting discussion, from the new charter to social currencies, to indigenous methods and systems, and to food. But there is some interesting discussions also going on, whether we have a separate working group. My say will be it should be a transversal, instead of forming another group. And as suggested by Maria, we need to interact more between each other and between the various working groups and NSCs, and take this conversation forward. I now request all the speakers and panelists just to take half a minute and say one thing about what we need to do as ICOMOS to take this discussion forward, and we'll conclude with that today. Thank you. So I'll start in the order you spoke. So over to Celia.
Thank you, Ananya. Well, I only have a half minute, and it's going to be, of course, to again invite everybody here in this meeting to consult the charter and to use this charter in order to address these topics when dealing with tourism. We are facing a very, very fragile and important moment in tourism, because we thought that maybe tourism will be more responsible and sustainable after the COVID crisis. As much as I see in my city, it is not at all like that. So I think that the charter is a very important inspiration for us to deal with the topics we have been discussing. And I think it's the first ICOMOS standard setting document that is dealing with climate change, communities resilience, tourism impacts, and participatory governance all together. So I would really like, again, to encourage everybody to consult it and use it. And thank you very much for coming. It's been great to be here and listening to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cecily.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start by supporting Celia, and that the charter, it's a way to bring diversity into shared purpose, and it's a way that we can actually start to practice a form of polycentricity and governance, not only by speaking around it, but also to translate it into practice. And yeah, I also challenge that we get a bit out of our heads and maybe try or be aware, not just introducing polycentricity and the commons approach as another thing that we just bring into our automated language and message. These ideas are in fact disruptive, and they could even disrupt the way that we've been thinking about and how we've been going around our practice. So maybe we need to kind of allow ourselves a bit of time to reflect upon this and really go deep into what does it mean and how does that relate to my practice, in order to kind of come out of it with meaningful new concepts that could bring our practice and also organization forward and make it a stronger and stronger arguments as we are contributing into the now very complex and important conversations and efforts we need to bring forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle.
Thank you very much. For me, I would say that this is a new phase in developing cultural tourism. I call it the next normal or the new normal. And in the new normal, for destinations to be climate resilient, for communities to well-being to be addressed, it is important that we look at our governance structures. And I feel as we are ideating on polycentric governance, I think I agree with Margaret, we need to develop guidelines. We need to come up with guidelines as ICOMOS to be able to assist governments to be able to come up with, adopt polycentric approaches towards dealing with the climate problem, especially within World Heritage Sites, as well as our cultural monuments, national monuments and sites. How can we adopt a polycentric approach towards making our monuments and sites more climate resilient? So I think we need to move further, walk the talk, and for ICOMOS, I think that would be an excellent addition as a working group. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruran.
Thank you. I think ICOMOS already has done many good things, and always, keeping updates with some new concepts from the technical points, using some big data and to monitor things such as climate changes, but also to encourage different way to such as our new charters mention not only the climate changes, also dealing with how to engage in more with local residents in different cultures, in different regions. And I think that is a good way. And it is important how to, because these new charters, how to, connect the charter to national policy and then local policy, and then how to really engage with local residents in different area. That is things we need to, to do in next 5 years or 10 years things. So thank you.
Thank you. And we're really running over the time. I know many of you want to add and want to discuss, but I'll just give the last half a minute to Sophia.
Thank you. Well, I agree with Roran. Now we have to bring our charter to life. We have to bring charter to our communities and try to bring these principles forward. And regarding food systems, food waste and all that, I would like to ICOMOS to bring forward also these kind of practices that we can, as a community of world, we are everywhere around the world. So maybe there are other food systems, there are other practices that can come together and create this network of food reduction through heritage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone. Priyanka is signaling that we must end now. So thanks a lot to all the speakers, to all the participants, to Priyanka for managing, and to Yunku and Journey for keeping the time and giving us the points. With this, we end, and Priyanka, you can stop the recording. And have we taken a group photo, Priyanka?